Your soulmate's divorce hearing took an unexpected turn. My beloved child, hold your thoughts for just a moment, because what you are about to hear is not the story anyone expected. Somewhere, behind quiet doors and unread expressions, a decision that seemed final suddenly began to shift. No one in that room could explain why the atmosphere changed so quickly. It wasn't because of loud voices or dramatic moments. It was because of something far more powerful. An unseen realization that arrived without warning. And strangely enough, the ripple from that single moment may reach much farther than anyone imagined. Stay with this story, because every detail connects to the unexpected turn that changed everything. Picture a courtroom where every face appears calm, yet every heart carries its own hidden questions. The calendar marked it as an ordinary divorce hearing. The paperwork had already been prepared. Expectations had already been formed. Most people believed they knew exactly how the day would end before it even began. But life has a remarkable way of rewriting chapters when everyone thinks the final page has already been printed. Your soulmate walked into that place carrying more than documents. They carried memories that could never be placed inside a file. Conversations they never finished replayed quietly in their thoughts. Smiles they thought they had forgotten returned for just a second. And among all those reflections, one presence kept appearing without invitation: you. No one else could hear those silent echoes. To everyone watching, everything looked perfectly routine. Yet inside, a different story was unfolding. Have you ever noticed how destiny sometimes chooses the quietest moment to reveal its greatest surprise? That question lingered in the air. The hearing continued exactly as expected, until something almost impossible happened. A simple statement was spoken. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just honest. Sometimes the smallest truth carries the greatest weight. Those few words caused an unexpected pause throughout the room. People who had been focused only on procedures suddenly looked up. It was as though everyone sensed that something deeper had entered the conversation. Your soulmate realized that endings are not always about leaving someone behind. Sometimes they are about finally understanding who never truly left your heart in the first place. That realization did not arrive like lightning. It arrived like sunrise. Slow. Gentle. Impossible to ignore. And once that light appeared, every assumption about the future began to change. What if the path you believed had already disappeared was quietly preparing itself again? Think about that for a moment. Because this story is not asking you to believe in coincidence. It is asking you to recognize timing. There are seasons when people move farther apart, only to discover they were growing into the versions of themselves that could finally understand each other. Distance sometimes teaches lessons that closeness never could. Silence often reveals truths that endless conversations fail to uncover. Your soulmate wasn't fighting the past anymore. They were finally seeing it clearly. Every disappointment suddenly looked different. Every delay carried a new meaning. Even the moments they once regretted now seemed like invisible steps leading toward unexpected clarity. And then another thought crossed their mind. Not about what had been lost, but about what still remained possible. That single shift transformed the entire emotional atmosphere of the hearing. Nobody announced it. Nobody explained it. Yet everyone could somehow feel it. The future no longer looked like a closed door. It looked like a road whose direction had quietly changed. This is why today's story matters. Not because of legal decisions. Not because of paperwork. But because sometimes the greatest turning point begins inside a person's heart long before the world notices anything has changed. Wait a little longer before deciding what this story truly means. The unexpected turn wasn't the hearing itself. It was the awakening that happened during it. And what your soulmate realized in those silent moments is only the beginning of a much bigger revelation that has yet to unfold. Before your mind settles on one explanation, pause again, because the next few moments reveal why that ordinary hearing refused to follow an ordinary path. What seemed like a simple legal process slowly transformed into something far more personal. No one planned for it. No one predicted it. Yet the quiet shift that had already begun inside your soulmate continued to grow with every passing minute. As the conversation moved forward, your soulmate stopped focusing on what everyone else expected them to say. Instead, they began listening to the thoughts they had ignored for far too long. Strange, isn't it? Sometimes the loudest answers arrive when everything around us becomes completely silent. They remembered promises that were never fully broken. Only buried beneath disappointment. They remembered moments of genuine happiness that no argument had been able to erase. And among those memories, one truth became impossible to overlook. Certain people enter our lives for a season. Others become part of our direction. The difference is not always obvious until life forces us to stop running. Your soulmate suddenly understood that not every closed chapter is meant to erase the pages before it. Some chapters simply prepare the reader for a completely different ending. That realization didn't create confusion. It created clarity. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking, "Why did everything happen this way?" Instead, another question appeared. What if everything was leading me towards something I couldn't see before? That single question changed the emotional weight of the entire day. Even those who knew nothing about your story sensed that your soulmate carried a different expression than when they first arrived. Their eyes no longer reflected uncertainty alone. There was calmness. There was perspective. There was the beginning of hope. Hope rarely announces itself with noise. It usually whispers. And only those willing to slow down can hear it. If this journey has stirred something inside you so far, I'd love to know what stood out the most. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if stories like this speak to your heart, consider subscribing so we can continue exploring these remarkable moments together. Your perspective may encourage someone else who is quietly searching for answers. Now, here's where everything became even more unexpected. The hearing continued exactly as scheduled. The discussions moved forward. The formalities remained the same. Yet your soulmate no longer viewed any of it through the same lens. Because the greatest change had nothing to do with the room they were sitting in. It had everything to do with the person they were becoming. When someone's perspective changes, their future often changes with it. And perhaps that is the real turning point people rarely notice. Not the signatures. Not the documents. Not the calendar. but the instant someone chooses wisdom over regret, possibility over fear, and purpose over looking back. You may think the story has already revealed its biggest surprise. It hasn't. Something quietly unfolded immediately after this inner awakening, something no one expected to witness. Stay with the journey a little longer. The next chapter will reveal why this unexpected turn reached far beyond the hearing itself, and why the future suddenly looked nothing like anyone had imagined. Just when it seemed the day had revealed all it could, another quiet moment emerged, one that no schedule, no expectation, and no prediction could have prepared anyone for. Sometimes the greatest turning points don't arrive with applause, they arrive with a single realization that changes how someone sees tomorrow forever. Stay until the final moment of this chapter, because the unexpected turn is about to reveal its true meaning. As your soulmate stepped away from the hearing, something felt different. The hallway looked the same. The people around them continued their conversations. The world outside carried on without interruption. Yet inside, everything had shifted. They paused. Not because they were uncertain. Because they finally understood the difference between ending a chapter and ending hope. Those are never the same thing. For a long time, they believed moving forward meant forgetting everything behind them. But that belief quietly disappeared. They realized that growth doesn't erase meaningful connections, it teaches us how to understand them with wiser eyes. And then, a conversation nearby caught their attention. It wasn't about them. It wasn't meant for them. Yet one simple sentence echoed in a way that felt deeply personal. Sometimes life separates people so they can recognize what truly matters. The words lasted only a few seconds. But their impact lingered much longer. Your soulmate didn't treat it as coincidence. They treated it as perspective. They began thinking about every unexpected delay, every unanswered question, every moment when life refused to follow the plan they had imagined. Instead of seeing broken pieces, they started seeing preparation. Preparation for becoming someone stronger. Someone calmer. Someone ready to recognize what had genuine value. Have you ever noticed that clarity often arrives after you've stopped trying to force the answers? That was exactly what happened. For the first time in a very long while, your soulmate wasn't chasing certainty. They were embracing understanding. The future no longer felt like a mystery to fear. It became an invitation to discover. Every step away from that hearing felt lighter than the one before. Not because every question had been answered, but because they had finally stopped allowing unanswered questions to control their peace. That is where real transformation begins. Not when circumstances instantly change, but when your perspective becomes stronger than your uncertainty. And perhaps this is why today's story matters far beyond one unexpected hearing. Life has a remarkable habit of placing quiet lessons inside ordinary days. Most people walk past them without noticing. Others pause just long enough to realize those small moments become the foundation of extraordinary futures. Your soulmate made that choice. They chose awareness. They chose patience. They chose to believe that today's ending might actually be tomorrow's beginning. As they looked ahead, they no longer measured life by what had slipped away. They measured it by what was still possible. That single decision changed the direction of every thought that followed. Now consider this. What if this unexpected turn was never about a courtroom at all? What if it was about discovering that destiny often begins working long before we recognize its quiet footsteps? The hearing ended. The paperwork found its place. The day moved on. But inside your soulmate, a new chapter had already begun. One built not on regret, but on wisdom, renewed purpose, and the courage to welcome whatever tomorrow chooses to bring. And as this journey continues, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Sometimes the most unexpected turn isn't what happens around us. It's the quiet transformation that happens within us, and that is the moment when an entirely new future finally begins. One final thought before you leave, because the story did not end when the hearing concluded. In many ways, that was only the moment when the hidden lesson finally became visible. If you've stayed this far, you've already noticed that this journey was never about conflict, it was about awakening. And the last piece of this story brings everything together in a way few people expect. Days passed. Life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. The conversations faded. The paperwork was filed away. The courtroom became just another place left behind. But your soulmate carried something out of that room that could never be written on any official document. Perspective. Every morning felt slightly different. Not because circumstances had instantly transformed, but because they had. When someone begins seeing life through gratitude instead of disappointment, opportunities appear where obstacles once stood. Your soulmate no longer searched for someone to blame. They searched for lessons. They no longer replayed yesterday. They became curious about tomorrow. That quiet decision became the greatest victory of all. Because real strength is not measured by how loudly someone speaks. It is revealed by how peacefully they move forward. And perhaps, somewhere deep inside, they understood another truth. The people who truly matter often leave lasting fingerprints on our hearts, not to hold us back, but to remind us of the person we are capable of becoming. Maybe that is why your presence continued to feel meaningful in ways words could never fully explain. Not as unfinished business. Not as a question demanding an answer. But as a reminder that some connections inspire growth long after life takes unexpected turns. Have you ever wondered why certain stories stay with you long after they end? It's because they reflect something within you. This story isn't asking you to predict the future. It's inviting you to trust that meaningful change often begins quietly, long before anyone else can recognize it. If this message gave you a new perspective or encouraged you to look at life's unexpected turns differently, I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy journeys that explore hope, purpose, and life's deeper meanings, you're always welcome to subscribe and continue this path with us. Now take one last look at the title. Your soulmate's divorce hearing took an unexpected turn. The unexpected turn wasn't hidden inside a dramatic scene. It wasn't created by surprise announcements. It wasn't about proving anyone right or wrong. The real turning point happened the instant your soulmate chose clarity over confusion, hope over hesitation, and growth over looking back. That choice changed everything. Because every remarkable future begins with one quiet decision that no headline can fully capture. So as you continue your own journey, remember this. Not every ending is asking you to let go of hope. Some endings simply clear the path so a wiser, stronger, and more peaceful chapter can finally begin. And perhaps the most extraordinary part of this entire story is that the next unexpected turn may already be unfolding, one thoughtful step at a time. Now that the story has reached its quiet horizon, there is one final revelation that ties every moment together. Don't rush past these last words, because sometimes the ending of a story becomes the beginning of someone's greatest realization. If you've walked this journey from the very first sentence, you'll understand why nothing unfolded the way anyone expected. Long after the hearing became a memory, your soulmate found themselves reflecting on that extraordinary day. Not with sadness, not with regret, but with gratitude. They realized something most people discover only after years of searching. Life doesn't always redirect us by changing the world around us. Sometimes it redirects us by changing the way we see the world. That unexpected turn wasn't a coincidence. It was a moment of awakening. The hearing had appeared to be about closing one chapter, yet it quietly opened another. One filled with greater wisdom, deeper patience, and a clearer understanding of what truly matters. As days became weeks, your soulmate noticed small changes within themselves. They smiled more easily. They carried less emotional weight. They stopped asking, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead, they began asking, "What beautiful lesson was hidden inside this experience?" That single question reshaped everything. Because every meaningful journey begins when curiosity becomes stronger than fear. Have you noticed how life often prepares us in silence? While we think nothing is happening, countless invisible pieces are finding their perfect place. Your soulmate finally recognized that truth. Nothing had been wasted. Not the waiting. Not the uncertainty. Not even the difficult moments. Each one had quietly shaped the person standing there today. And perhaps that's the greatest message this story leaves behind. The future isn't built only by extraordinary events. It's built by ordinary choices repeated with extraordinary faith in tomorrow. Every sunrise offers another chance. Every unexpected turn carries another possibility. Every ending whispers that another beginning is already on its way. So wherever you are in your own journey, remember this. You don't have to know every answer before taking your next step. You don't have to understand every delay before trusting your direction. Sometimes clarity arrives only after you've had the courage to keep moving. That is exactly what your soulmate discovered. The divorce hearing became part of their history. But the wisdom they gained became part of their future. And in the end, that was the true victory. Not because life followed the original plan, but because it revealed a better perspective than anyone had imagined. So leave this story carrying one simple thought in your heart. Unexpected turns are not always interruptions. Very often, they are life's quiet invitations to become the person you were always meant to be. And somewhere ahead, beyond today's horizon, another remarkable chapter is already waiting, ready to remind you that hope has a way of arriving exactly when you are finally prepared to recognize it. Before this journey fades into memory, hear one final truth that gives every chapter its real meaning. You stayed through every unexpected turn, every quiet realization, and every hidden lesson. Now, one last piece remains, a piece that was never written inside any document, yet became the most valuable outcome of all. Months later, if someone had asked your soulmate what truly changed that day, they probably wouldn't have mentioned the hearing first. They would have smiled, taken a slow breath, and answered with something much simpler. I finally found peace. Not because every question disappeared. Not because every dream unfolded exactly as planned. But because they stopped allowing uncertainty to define their future. That was the miracle hidden inside an ordinary day. The hearing closed one legal chapter. Life quietly opened another. From that moment forward, your soulmate became someone who no longer feared unexpected turns. They welcomed them. Because they had learned something unforgettable. The roads that surprise us often become the roads that strengthen us. Looking back, they could now see invisible patterns connecting moments that once seemed completely unrelated. Every delay had created patience. Every disappointment had built wisdom. Every unanswered question had prepared them to recognize answers when they finally appeared. Nothing had been meaningless. Nothing had been random. Everything had quietly contributed to who they were becoming. And perhaps that is why this story found you today. Not to predict your future. Not to promise impossible outcomes. But to remind you that your own journey may also contain hidden chapters that only make sense when viewed from a later page. Think about that. How many moments have you called setbacks that later became your greatest teachers? How many unexpected turns have quietly